It was a quiet afternoon on an old bridge stretching across a peaceful river. The wind whispered through the railings, and sunlight danced on the water like a shimmering mirror. Malik, a 12-year-old boy, sat by the riverbank fishing, hoping to catch something for his family's dinner. Everything seemed ordinary until a sudden noise shattered the tranquility. In the distance, a sleek black car screeched to a halt in the middle of the bridge. An older man, looking weary and defeated, was forcefully shoved over the edge, plunging into the river below. Malik, startled and frozen in disbelief, witnessed the shocking scene unfold. Fear and confusion gripped him, but an urgent question loomed. Should he stay hidden and pretend he saw nothing, or risk everything by diving in to save the drowning man? Little did Malik know, his decision that day would alter not just his own life, but also the lives of those around him. That single act of courage would uncover a sinister conspiracy and test his bravery, resilience, and sense of justice far beyond what any child his age should ever face. This is the story of an extraordinary moment in an ordinary life. What would you do if you were in Malik's shoes? Join us as we unravel a tale of courage, compassion, and the unexpected ripple effects of one bold choice. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. To understand the weight of Malik's story, we must first set the stage. Picture a small riverside village tucked away from the chaos of urban life, where time moves at a slower pace. This is a community where everyone knows each other, where trust is a currency more valuable than gold. Yet beneath this seemingly idyllic surface lies the quiet tension that comes with limited opportunities and deep-rooted societal divides. Malik, like many children in the village, grew up learning to navigate a world shaped by tradition and survival. His days were spent between the classroom and the outdoors, where he honed his skills in fishing and gathering firewood. His family, though not wealthy, was rich in love and resilience, a bond forged through shared struggles and unspoken sacrifices. But even in a place like this, where the air carries the scent of freshly tilled soil and the nights are filled with the sound of chirping crickets, shadows often loom large. These shadows are not the kind cast by trees or buildings, but by fear and unspoken truths. The bridge that stretched across the river was more than just a physical structure. It was a metaphor for the divide between the comfortable and the desperate, the privileged and the powerless. The black car on that bridge wasn't an ordinary vehicle. It represented the intrusion of something alien, something far removed from the simplicity of village life. It brought with it an aura of mystery, power, and menace. In many ways, it was a symbol of how the troubles of the outside world have a way of seeping into even the most isolated corners. What makes Malik's story so poignant is not just the event itself, but the context in which it occurred. This is a boy who, like many others, had been taught to respect his elders, to stay out of trouble, and to avoid crossing lines that could bring danger to his family. And yet, in a split second, he found himself at a crossroads. His instincts told him to act, but the risks were undeniable. This moment forces us to reflect on the larger dynamics at play. What drives a man to be thrown from a bridge? What kind of world allows such violence to occur in broad daylight? And perhaps most importantly, what does it take for a child, someone who should be shielded from such harsh realities, to rise above fear and step into the unknown? Through Malik's story, we're reminded of the fragility of innocence in a world often dictated by power and corruption. But we're also reminded of the immense strength that can emerge from even the smallest acts of bravery. As we move deeper into this tale, we'll uncover the layers of complexity that surround that fateful day, layers that speak to the resilience of the human spirit, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the way courage can ripple outward to inspire change. Let's continue to explore this narrative, not just through the lens of Malik's actions, but also through the broader lessons it teaches us about justice, morality, and the enduring fight for what is good in the face of adversity. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into this story and reflect on its powerful implications. The morning air was crisp and unusually quiet. Malik stood on the muddy bank of the river, his bare feet sinking slightly into the damp earth as he stared at the bridge ahead. The black car sat motionless in the middle of the bridge, its engine idling faintly, its ominous presence disrupting the peaceful rhythm of the village. What Malik didn't know yet was that this would be the day his life, and the lives of those in his community, would change forever. From the corner of his eye, Malik noticed something unusual, a man struggling against two figures. The scuffle was brief but violent, ending with the man being hurled over the bridge's railing. Time seemed to slow as the figure tumbled into the river below. Malik's instincts kicked in, his heart racing as he processed what he had just witnessed. Malik was only 12 years old, yet in that moment, he understood the gravity of the situation. The river, while shallow in some areas, was known for its strong currents. If the man wasn't unconscious from the fall, he would soon be overwhelmed by the water's force. Malik hesitated for just a moment, weighing the dangers. He couldn't swim well, and his parents had warned him countless times about the river's dangers. But this wasn't just about his own safety. Someone's life was hanging in the balance. With a deep breath, Malik sprinted toward the river, his mind focused and clear. He stripped off his shirt and jumped into the frigid water without a second thought. The current tugged at his small frame, but he fought against it with every ounce of strength he had. His eyes scanned the surface, searching desperately for any sign of the man. Finally, he saw him, a figure bobbing lifelessly a few meters away. Malik paddled furiously, his arms and legs burning with the effort. When he reached the man, he grabbed hold of his shirt and began the arduous task of pulling him toward the shore. The man was heavy, and the current was relentless. But Malik's determination never wavered. As he neared the bank, villagers who had witnessed the commotion rushed to help. Strong hands reached out, pulling both Malik and the unconscious man from the water. Malik collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, his small body trembling from exhaustion and cold. The man lay motionless, his face pale and his lips blue. One of the elders, who had some knowledge of first aid, began performing chest compressions. The villagers formed a circle, their faces etched with worry. Malik watched with bated breath, silently willing the man to wake up. After what felt like an eternity, the man coughed violently, water spewing from his mouth. A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. Malik felt a wave of emotion, relief, pride, and even a hint of fear about what might happen next. But the ordeal wasn't over. The black car had sped away moments after Malik had jumped into the water, leaving behind a trail of dust and questions. Who were those men? Why had they thrown this man off the bridge? And most importantly, what would they do when they realized the man had survived? The rescued man, once he regained his breath, thanked Malik with tears in his eyes. He introduced himself as Rami, a journalist investigating corruption in the region. He had uncovered evidence implicating powerful figures in illegal activities and had been targeted as a result. Malik's act of bravery had not only saved Rami's life, but also set in motion a chain of events that would expose the corruption threatening their community. As word of the rescue spread, the villagers rallied around Malik and Rami, vowing to protect them both from any retaliation. In the days that followed, Malik became an unlikely hero. His story was shared far beyond the village, inspiring others to stand up against injustice. For Malik, however, the experience was about more than recognition. It was a moment that taught him the value of courage, the importance of acting in the face of fear, and the power of a single decision to change the course of many lives. Malik's decision to jump into the river that day wasn't just an act of bravery. It was a symbol of hope in a world that often feels overwhelming and unjust. It reminded everyone who heard his story that even the smallest among us can make a difference, and that sometimes it takes just one leap of faith to rescue not only a life, but an entire community's spirit. The sunlight streamed through the cracked windows of the old library, casting long shadows across the wooden floors. Tanya paced back and forth, her hands trembling as she clutched the letter Malik had left behind. Each word on the page burned into her mind, unraveling a mystery she hadn't known she was a part of. Tanya, I couldn't tell you before, but I need you to trust me. There's something bigger happening here, something dangerous. Please, go to the oak tree near the bridge. You'll find what you need to know. Her heart raced as she reread the note, trying to piece together Malik's cryptic words. Just the day before, Malik had returned to the village soaking wet, a quiet determination in his eyes. He had said little about what happened, brushing off questions with a reassuring smile. Now, with him gone and this letter as her only clue, Tanya couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was unfolding. Tanya and Malik had grown up together, their bond forged through shared struggles and quiet victories. She knew him better than anyone, or so she thought. Yet this side of him, this secret of determination, was unfamiliar. She felt a pang of betrayal but pushed it aside. Whatever Malik was involved in, she owed it to him to find out. She hurried down the dirt path toward the bridge, her mind racing with possibilities. What could he have meant by something bigger? Her imagination conjured images of hidden treasures, forbidden secrets, or perhaps some dangerous game Malik had unwittingly stumbled into. As she reached the oak tree, her breath caught. Nestled among the roots was a small metal box, its surface scratched and weathered. Tanya hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering over the latch. Her instinct screamed caution, but curiosity won out. With a deep breath, she flipped open the lid. Inside was a jumble of papers, photographs, and a small flash drive. Tanya's brow furrowed as she pulled out the items, laying them carefully on the ground. The photographs were old and grainy, depicting unfamiliar faces standing in front of what looked like government buildings. The papers were scribbled with notes, diagrams, and what appeared to be maps. But it was the flash drive that caught her attention. Malik must have known she would recognize its importance. Tanya's part-time job at the school's computer lab had made her proficient in handling technology. She slipped the drive into her pocket and hurried back to the library. Once inside, she powered up the library's ancient computer, its fans groaning in protest. As the desktop flickered to life, Tanya inserted the flash drive, her fingers trembling with a mix of anticipation and dread. The files were protected by a password, but Tanya knew Malik well enough to guess it. She typed in the name of the stray dog they had rescued as kids, Shadow, and held her breath. The files unlocked. What she found was beyond anything she could have imagined. The drive contained detailed reports implicating high-ranking officials in a web of corruption, smuggling, and violence. There were documents linking these officials to recent disappearances in the region, including a list of names. Tanya's stomach churned when she recognized some of the names. People from their own village who had vanished without explanation. Among the files was a video recording. Tanya clicked on it, and the screen filled with grainy footage of a man speaking in hushed tones. It was Rami, the journalist Malik had rescued. His voice was urgent as he detailed the danger he was in and the evidence he had uncovered. "If you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it," Rami said, his face shadowed but resolute. "But the truth must come out. This is bigger than me, bigger than any of us. Share this with those who can help." Tanya sat back in her chair, the weight of what she had discovered pressing down on her. Malik's actions suddenly made sense. He hadn't just been saving a man's life. He had been thrust into a battle against forces far larger than himself. And now, Tanya was part of it too. Her initial feelings of betrayal were replaced by a fierce determination. Malik had trusted her with this, knowing she would rise to the challenge. She realized the stakes were higher than she'd ever imagined, and the people behind this corruption would stop at nothing to silence those who opposed them. But Tanya wasn't one to back down. She grabbed her phone, took photos of the files, and uploaded the most damning evidence to a secure cloud server. Then she made a list of people she could trust: teachers, local activists, and a journalist from a nearby city who had once spoken at her school. As night fell, Tanya sat in the dim glow of the computer screen, formulating a plan. She would contact these allies and ensure the truth was exposed. Malik had taken the first step by saving Rami. Now, it was her turn to carry the torch. Tanya's discovery wasn't just about uncovering corruption. It was a call to action, a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage could ripple outwards and spark change. The truth was out there, waiting to be revealed, and Tanya was ready to fight for it. The small, dimly lit room was silent except for the faint hum of Tanya's computer. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she stared at the screen. The files on the flash drive were only the beginning. What she had stumbled upon was not just a series of documents, but a trail leading to a shadowy conspiracy that reached far beyond her village. Tanya began piecing the puzzle together. The evidence detailed covert operations, financial transactions, and coded messages that hinted at a network of corruption involving influential figures, business tycoons, government officials, and even law enforcement. At first, the magnitude of it overwhelmed her. How could someone like her, a young woman from a forgotten village, possibly stand against something so vast? But Malik's bravery gave her strength. If he had risked everything to bring these truths to light, she couldn't let fear hold her back. The documents revealed that Malik's involvement was no coincidence. The journalist he had saved, Rami, had been tracking this conspiracy for years. His work had uncovered a ring of human trafficking and illegal arms deals that funded powerful figures across the region. The names on the lists Tanya found weren't just victims. They were people who had dared to challenge the system or stumbled too close to the truth. Tanya's stomach churned as she realized how close this corruption had come to her own life. She remembered the stories whispered in her village: farmers who had lost their land, small businesses forced to close, families grieving loved ones who had disappeared. These weren't random misfortunes. They were calculated moves in a game controlled by those in power. She dug deeper, cross-referencing the maps and notes in the metal box with the files on the drive. A pattern began to emerge. The maps marked locations of abandoned factories, secluded warehouses, and remote airstrips, places where illicit activities could easily go unnoticed. Tanya realized these sites weren't far from her village. The conspiracy wasn't some distant, intangible evil. It was operating in her backyard. The more she uncovered, the more she understood the stakes. These people wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatened their operation. She thought of Malik and the danger he must have faced when he decided to rescue Rami. Had he known what he was stepping into? As night fell, Tanya reached out to the journalist from the nearby city, a woman named Safia who had a reputation for exposing corruption. She sent an encrypted message with some of the evidence, asking for a discreet meeting. If anyone could help her navigate this perilous situation, it was someone with Safia's experience. The next morning, Tanya met Safia in a crowded cafe, the noise of clinking cups and quiet chatter providing a layer of anonymity. Safia was calm but focused as she listened to Tanya's story. When Tanya showed her the files, the journalist's expression darkened. "This is bigger than anything I've worked on," Safia admitted. "If this is real, it's not just about corruption. It's a full-scale operation involving people who will do whatever it takes to protect their interests." Tanya felt a surge of both fear and determination. Safia agreed to help, but she warned Tanya to be cautious. "We need to act strategically. If they realize we have this information, they'll come after us." Over the next few days, Tanya and Safia worked together, carefully verifying the evidence and reaching out to trusted allies. They uncovered more connections between the conspiracy and influential figures, bank accounts linked to offshore holdings, coded communications revealing plans for future operations, and testimonies from survivors who had escaped the trafficking ring. But the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous their situation became. Tanya began noticing unfamiliar faces lingering near the library and strangers asking questions about her at the market. She knew they were being watched. One evening, Tanya returned home to find her room ransacked. The flash drive was gone, but she had anticipated this and made multiple copies of the data. She realized she couldn't stay in the village any longer. The network was closing in, and she needed to take the fight to a higher level. Safia arranged for Tanya to travel to the city, where they could present the evidence to international organizations and journalists with broader reach. But even as they made plans, Tanya couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The people behind the conspiracy weren't just powerful, they were ruthless. The final piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly. Safia received an anonymous tip pointing to a high-profile charity gala taking place in the city. The tip suggested that many of the key players in the conspiracy would be there, using the event as a front for their dealings. It was an opportunity to gather more evidence and potentially confront those responsible. Tanya and Safia devised a plan to infiltrate the gala. With the help of Safia's contacts, Tanya disguised herself as one of the event's staff, blending into the crowd of servers and assistants. As she moved through the opulent hall, she couldn't help but feel the weight of her mission. These were the people who had orchestrated so much pain and suffering, laughing and drinking as though they were untouchable. In a quiet corner of the room, Tanya spotted a familiar face, one of the officials whose name had appeared repeatedly in the files. He was deep in conversation with a businessman whose photograph had been included in Rami's collection. Tanya discreetly activated the recording device hidden in her uniform, edging closer to capture their conversation. Their words confirmed her worst fears. They discussed upcoming shipments, coded language for trafficking operations, and referenced payments to keep the wheels greased. The evidence was damning, but Tanya knew she needed more. She glanced toward the security office, remembering Safia's instructions. If she could access the surveillance room, they might uncover even more proof of illicit dealings happening during the event. Making her way to the back corridors, Tanya felt her pulse quicken. Every step brought her closer to exposing the conspiracy, but also closer to danger. She slipped into the security office unnoticed, using a forged access card Safia had provided. Inside, monitors displayed footage of the gala, as well as restricted areas where staff were forbidden to go. On one of the screens, Tanya noticed a group of men entering a private lounge. She recognized two of them as prominent figures from the files. She quickly copied the video feed onto a USB drive and left the office, her heart pounding. As Tanya rejoined the gala floor, she saw Safia nodding subtly from across the room. It was time to leave. The evidence they had gathered tonight could bring the conspiracy to light, but they needed to escape before anyone realized what they had done. Tanya and Safia left the gala under the pretense of a staff shift change. Blending into the night, they knew the battle was far from over, but for the first time, they had the upper hand. The conspiracy was beginning to unravel, and Tanya vowed to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The air was heavy with tension as Tanya and Safia reviewed their plans. The evidence they had gathered was explosive, but it wasn't enough to topple a network as vast and powerful as this one. They needed to go public, fast. However, the risks were escalating. The shadows felt thicker, and the stares of strangers lingered too long. Tanya could sense the walls closing in. That night, Safia arranged for a live interview with an underground media outlet. Their goal was simple: expose the conspiracy to the world before their enemies could silence them. Tanya clutched her bag tightly, the USB drive hidden in a secret compartment. It held video proof from the gala, financial records, and the names of key players. It was her only weapon against the people hunting her. But as they stepped out of the safe house, the danger became real. A sleek black car idled across the street, its windows tinted. Tanya felt a chill run down her spine as two men stepped out, their eyes scanning the alley. She nudged Safia, and they slipped into a side street, moving quickly but cautiously. The narrow alley led to a crowded market, where the noise and bustle provided some cover. Tanya pulled her scarf tighter around her face, blending in with the throng of shoppers. Safia whispered, "Keep moving. Don't look back." Suddenly, a commotion erupted behind them. A vendor shouted as someone shoved through the crowd. Tanya glanced back and saw the men from the car closing in. Her heart raced. They had been found. Safia grabbed her arm. "Run." They sprinted through the maze of stalls, overturning crates and dodging startled shoppers. Tanya could hear the heavy footsteps of their pursuers and the sharp bark of orders being shouted in a language she didn't understand. She turned a corner, only to find herself at a dead end. "Up." Safia pointed to a fire escape ladder on the side of a building. Without hesitation, Tanya leapt for it, her fingers barely catching the metal rung. She climbed as fast as she could, Safia close behind. Below, their pursuers reached the alley, shouting into radios and scanning the area. Reaching the rooftop, Tanya and Safia paused to catch their breath. The city stretched out before them, a chaotic labyrinth of lights and shadows. But there was no time to rest. The men would find another way up. Safia pulled out her phone and called Rami, the journalist Malik had rescued. "We're compromised," she said, her voice steady despite the urgency. "Meet us at the fallback point." They made their way across the rooftops, jumping from one building to the next. Tanya's heart pounded with fear and adrenaline. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound a potential threat, but she refused to let the fear consume her. She had come too far to back down now. As they reached a safe distance, they climbed down into an abandoned warehouse, their designated fallback point. Rami was already there, pacing nervously. When he saw them, he rushed over. "Did you get it?" he asked. Tanya handed him the USB drive. "Everything's here, but they know we have it." Rami plugged the drive into his laptop, his eyes scanning the files. "This is enough to bring them down," he said, his voice filled with a mix of awe and determination. "But we need to act now. They'll come for us." The warehouse door creaked open, and everyone froze. A shadowy figure stepped inside, and for a moment, Tanya's breath caught in her throat. But it was a familiar face, one of Safia's trusted contacts, a former police officer named Amir. "They're closing in," Amir said grimly. "You've got maybe 10 minutes before this place is swarmed." Rami nodded. "We go live now." He set up his laptop and connected to a secure network. Tanya and Safia prepared to speak, their voices trembling but resolute. As the broadcast began, Tanya told her story: Malik's rescue of Rami, the discovery of the files, the conspiracy's reach into her own village, and the names of those involved. The world needed to know, and Tanya poured every ounce of her fear and anger into her words. She described the lives destroyed by greed and corruption, the families torn apart, and the futures stolen. As the broadcast continued, the sound of engines echoed outside the warehouse. Safia glanced at Amir, who nodded. "They're here." Amir drew his weapon and positioned himself near the door. "Finish the broadcast. I'll buy you time." Tanya's heart ached as she saw the determination in his eyes. She knew he might not make it out, but there was no time to argue. The truth had to be told. The sound of gunfire erupted outside, and Tanya's voice faltered. Safia placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Keep going," she urged. Tanya took a deep breath and continued speaking, her voice rising above the chaos. "To those watching, this is not just my fight. It's ours. If we don't stand up now, this will keep happening. We need to hold these people accountable." Suddenly, the warehouse door burst open, and armed men stormed in. Safia shoved Tanya behind a stack of crates, shielding her from the attackers. Rami frantically uploaded the files to a secure server, his fingers flying across the keyboard. In the chaos, Tanya grabbed a crowbar and swung it at one of the attackers, adrenaline fueling her strength. Safia fought back fiercely, but they were outnumbered. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, sirens blared outside. The police, alerted by the broadcast, arrived in force, surrounding the warehouse. The attackers scattered, but many were apprehended. Tanya, bruised and battered, watched as officers secured the scene. Safia helped her to her feet, and they embraced tightly. The files were safe. The truth was out, and the conspiracy's grip had been weakened. But Tanya knew this was only the beginning. The fight for justice was far from over, and she was ready to see it through. The morning sunlight streamed through the hospital room's window, casting a warm glow over Tanya's face. Her body ached, her bruises a stark reminder of the night's chaos. But the weight in her chest was lighter than it had been in weeks. Safia sat beside her bed, exhaustion etched into her face, but with a faint smile of relief. The news was everywhere: headlines, breaking broadcasts, social media feeds. The files Tanya, Safia, and Rami had risked their lives to reveal were now public. The conspiracy that had seemed untouchable for so long was unraveling. Arrests were being made across the country as authorities, pressured by the public outcry, acted swiftly to dismantle the network. Tanya's village was no longer silent. Families began to speak out, sharing their own experiences and exposing how deeply corruption had seeped into their lives. People who had been too afraid to stand up now found their courage, inspired by the story of a young woman who had refused to be silenced. Rami entered the room with a laptop under his arm. "You're a hero," he said, grinning as he set the device down. "The world is listening." "Tanya." He pulled up a video, the live broadcast they had streamed just hours earlier. Millions of views, countless comments, and messages of support flooded the page. People from across the globe expressed their solidarity, vowing to help in any way they could. Activists were organizing rallies. Crowdfunding campaigns were gaining traction, and legal experts were offering their services to help victims pursue justice. Tanya watched in silence, her eyes glistening with tears. She had never imagined her voice could spark such a movement. "I wasn't alone," she said softly. "None of this would have happened without all of you." Safia placed a hand on Tanya's shoulder. "But you were the heart of it. You made us believe we could win." The victory, however, was bittersweet. Amir had been gravely injured during the confrontation at the warehouse. He was in critical condition, and his fate remained uncertain. Tanya's chest tightened at the thought of the sacrifices others had made for this cause. Later that day, Safia wheeled Tanya down the hospital corridor to visit Amir. The room was quiet, save for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Amir's face was pale, but there was a calmness in his expression. Tanya reached for his hand, her voice trembling as she spoke. "You saved us, Amir. You gave us the chance to fight back. We'll never forget what you did." Amir opened his eyes briefly, a weak smile flickering across his face. "It was worth it," he murmured. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Tanya gave interviews to journalists, recounting the events that had led to the exposure of the conspiracy. She was careful to emphasize the bravery of others, Malik's pivotal decision to rescue Rami, Safia's relentless determination, and Amir's selfless courage. In the courtroom, Tanya faced the accused for the first time. The once powerful figures looked smaller now, stripped of their authority and bravado. As she testified, Tanya's voice was steady, each word cutting through the silence like a blade. She described the devastation their greed had caused, the lives destroyed, and the lengths they had gone to protect their empire. The trial was long and grueling, but the evidence was irrefutable. One by one, the conspirators were convicted, their sentences sending a clear message: no one was above justice. Despite the victories, Tanya knew the fight wasn't over. The corruption had left scars that would take years to heal. Families needed support, communities needed rebuilding, and trust in the system needed to be restored. Tanya decided to stay involved, working with activists and organizations to ensure lasting change. In her village, life slowly began to improve. The school reopened with new leadership, and the marketplace buzzed with renewed energy. Tanya became a symbol of resilience, her story inspiring others to speak out against injustice. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tanya stood on the hill overlooking her village. Safia joined her, a quiet moment shared between two friends who had faced the impossible together. "Do you ever wonder if it was worth it?" Tanya asked, her voice tinged with doubt. Safia looked at her, the determination in her eyes unwavering. "Every day, and every day, I know it was. Because now, they can't silence us. They can't take away what we've built." Tanya nodded, the weight of their journey settling into her chest. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about hope, about proving that even in the darkest moments, people could rise up and fight for what was right. Weeks later, at a community event in the village square, Tanya was invited to speak. She stood before a crowd of familiar faces, neighbors, friends, and even strangers who had come to support the cause. "Justice isn't a destination," she began, her voice carrying across the square. "It's a journey. It's the choices we make every day to stand up for what's right, to protect those who can't protect themselves, and to never stop fighting, even when it feels impossible. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." The applause was thunderous, but Tanya's heart remained humble. She wasn't a hero or a savior. She was just one person who had refused to give up, and that was enough to change everything. As the crowd dispersed, Tanya caught sight of Malik in the distance, his face filled with quiet pride. Their eyes met, and for a moment, no words were needed. The conspiracy had been broken, justice had been served, and hope had been rekindled. But for Tanya, the greatest victory was knowing that she had found her voice and that she would never be silenced again.